Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Racy from Foundation Expo 88 YouTube channel, and we're here this morning to do a couple of brief YouTube interviews with Sir Leo Hielscher. And everyone's probably heard the name because it now attaches to one of Brisbane's most loved bridges. And Sir Leo had an illustrious career being the Foundation Chairman to the Queensland Treasury Corporation, which is a highly respected role that he's undertaken over the last 18 years, 22, sorry, and is well recognised throughout the whole of Australia as a financial wizard. Now, Sir Leo had a unique role at Expo, and I'll let Sir Leo tell us just what role he did have leading up to Expo, and then I'm going to ask Sir Leo, and it'll become obvious why, as to what his thoughts were the day before Expo opened. So Sir Leo, if you can just tell us what role you had in relation to Expo.
Okay, at that time I was head of the Treasury Department with the title of Under Treasurer, and I'd been there nearly 14 years as Under Treasurer. And so therefore I was very, very aware that the Expo had to be performed financially soundly, because if whatever we missed out on, I had to find the cash for, I guess.
That's right.
And the gentleman who helped me in the determination of whether we have Expo or not was a man who was the head of the Premier's Department, Sir Sidney Schubert. So Sid and I were the two state bureaucrats that finally convinced the government to proceed with Expo.
And the brains trust, really. Along with, and there's another fellow in that little story as well, David Graham.
David Graham did a lot of work before we had come to those conclusions, convincing us that it was a financially viable proposition to put the Expo on.
Yes.
And David's figures showed us that we could do that, and we would be. And he did the detailed figures of telling us what we could be able to charge the Expo people, like the Russian government, the British government, and so forth, for their exhibitions, and also what the interest fee should be, and he multiplied it by the number he first thought of, and it came out. We were convinced, and well enough, to go to the government. I went to the government and said we can put this on at no cost to the budget eventually. It'll cost us money up near 1,000 million to do it, and then the revenues will start coming back, and we can no doubt get very close to a line ball at the end of the exhibition.
And that was 1,000 million in 1988 dollars, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't. I've just lost the number.
It wasn't actually, I think it was 600, I think.
Something like that. Anyhow, I just concluded that question. When the Expo wound up, we still owed $200 million, but we still had the land. So I was convinced that we did break even because the land was worth more than $200 million.
Yeah, right, and it certainly has proved to be one of Brisbane's best assets.
Yep.
So just going back to that question, which now hopefully people understand why. What was your thoughts the day before, when the nerves would have been at the maximum, I would have thought?
Let me put it this way, we'd been through a lot of gullies that were dry and not really flooded, and but we had all the exhibitors, all the countries in, we had the gates ready to open, we had a man on the staff, the CEO, a man named Bob Minikin, who I feel should get more credit than he has got, because he was the one that rolled his sleeves up and made it all happen. Now, so therefore I was reasonably confident that when the doors opened it was going to be satisfactory. But would you believe the night before we opened, we still had a lot of painting to do on the footpaths and whatever, and that was completed by the next morning, and we opened the gates and stand back, the crowd flocked in.
Before we started, we were just talking about a couple of humorous anecdotes in relation to Expo, and in this particular YouTube I did particularly want to talk about the period of time where the numbers going through the Expo sort of sent a thrill of joy through Sir Leo's heart, because Leo was on the board of Expo And so while he did retire on the day, or the day before, on the day of Expo, which is one of the funny stories that we'll be alluding to. In fact, why don't we talk about that story now? So Leo, tell us the story about the Queen and how she took your news that you were retiring from her good employee.
Well, as you know, the Queensland Expo building was one of the best on the site. And in the evening of the opening ceremony, she and her party visited the Expo exhibition hall, and they'd painted on the floor a track of two white lines as a snake through the theatre, through the exhibition hall, so she could see a lot of people. Everybody come up to the white line, and at that time the new premier was Mike Ahern, and as they come up towards us, Mike Ahern had the Queen on his arm or close by. Bill Gunn had the Duke, and the couple of ministers had the various princes on their arm. When he gets to me, he introduced me and he said, "Ma'am, this is Sir Leo Hielscher, the Under Treasurer for Queensland, and Leo is retiring today." And she made all sorts of lovely noises about happy retirement and healthy retirement, and as you do, if you don't really mean what you're saying, and then moved on. And then she came back, walked one step back, and she looked at me and she said, "Why would you be retiring?" And I said, "Well, now if she asked me the question, I can reply. I'm not going to raise the issue, but she's asked me the question. Protocol says I can reply." So I said, "Well, ma'am, I've worked for you for 46 years. I'm going to retire now and join the private sector and make some money." And she laughed and laughed and laughed. I think it was the first few words she'd heard since she'd hit the Australian soil, which weren't already prescribed that she hear and speak.
And
it was away from the script.
And she did actually have an incredibly busy time when she hit, because part of the project, I took my children out to Longreach and went to the Hall of Fame, and of course there's the plaque there, and she opened that the day before, and it was amazing. One day doing a major ceremony opening the Hall of Fame, that was a very substantial investment by Australians in the heritage of Australia, and then she's straight down doing Expo the next day, and it would have been very tiring for her.
I'll just add a little bit there. We went out to welcome her to Longreach for the event. We being the Premier and the Treasurer and whoever, and Sid Schubert and myself.
I knew that was royal we.
Yeah, and we left Longreach about 20 minutes or so before she did, and we landed at Eagle Farm, and then we welcomed her to Brisbane. It was and I don't know if she recognised it. We already welcomed her to Longreach.
Well, it's a good story. So now back to the main game, so to speak. So I would have thought at midpoint to Expo, maybe a bit earlier, the numbers and the support by Brisbaneites and Queenslanders flocking through the Expo site. I mean, you just must have realised, this is so much bigger and better than what sort of had realised. I mean, at what point did that sort of dawn upon you, and dawn upon the board? Let's just open that board solidarity just a smidgen and just have a look behind the curtain, so to speak.
Well, Sid Schubert and I on the board were the ones who were biting our fingernails up to our elbows, because we were the ones that had told the government that we could put it on for nil, and during the early part, a lot of doubts crept into their discussions, not only people coming to the gate, but also the numbers of people who were going to exhibit. We even had problems within Australia, who was going to exhibit from Australia. Yes,
I did read in the Hansard of the Commonwealth Government, there's questions to the then Minister, who was Graham Richardson, about when the other Labor states are going to come on board. And it was interesting to see the byplay, but we won't digress with that particular story. So yeah, going back to the core of it, just when did it dawn
that it was going to happen?
Well, that the success was bigger than what you thought.
Well, it wasn't really bigger. It was bigger than it was going to be. during the course of that period, 6 months or 12 months or however long it took us to get it rolling, it wasn't bigger because we had expected to end up nil and we had still had a $200 million debt.
But the visitors went, they were budgeted at 9.8 and ended up at 18 million.
18 million, that's correct, yeah. Oh, when did that happen? Oh, I suppose that only happened during the course of the Expo, because Expo became the place to go to in Brisbane, and people used to just wander in every Friday, for example, for 6 months.
That Neil Ford tells me of Polo fame and Yellow Taxi fame, tells me that his mother went to Expo every single day.
Every day.
Every single day. Go out to McDonald's at Mount Gravatt, where she's now got a gold pass, she's still alive, so she doesn't pay for her meals after God only knows how many years. And that might explain, how he's managed to get a little bit of coin in his pocket, not having to pay for McDonald's for his mother's for breakfast, and that she just visited and that she just loved it that much. And so, it was just an interesting little byplay of a story that he told me that brought home just how loved it was.
Yeah.
So.
When did it happen? Well, once again, we financed it, the Queensland government financed it, and what I really had done was a financial with an overdraft.
Huge overdraft.
Huge overdraft from our own funding, with some borrowings, and some borrowings were from overseas. And I know one short loan, when the borrowings from overseas were only for a short period because you didn't have it all paid back within 3 or 4 or 5 years. And I don't know which currency it was that I'm thinking of at the moment, but I kept it in that currency, which is something we don't do. We don't expose ourselves to the currency risk. But in that currency, the interest rate was 2% or 1%, but you run the risk of the exchange rate. So that's when I started to get my fingernails up towards my elbow. But it worked out okay, and so we were really on tenterhooks there for quite a while.
And with that, we'll move into the interesting story, a Cold War story of tension and drama between Russia and America. So Leo, if you could tell us that story.
Oh, fine. Well, you were mentioning before when did it all happen that we thought it was going to be a success. And one of the big issues that we were worried about was the number of people who were going to display, the number of countries that were going to display. And to make it a World Expo, we wanted everybody there. And we wanted the senior nations of the world. The United States had to be there, Australia, of course, Britain, of course, and Russia, of course, and Japan, and people like that, as well as the other nations as well, Nepal and whatever. Anyhow, trying to get Russia on board was a little bit difficult. And the Russian ambassador here had sent up a gentleman from Moscow who had come out to look at it. And this gentleman had come out twice. And he was quite a big man, rough and rugged, and he put us through the mince machine with these questions. But after the interviews, we always were kind to him, took him back out to the airport, so he could go home and think about it. And each time we did that, each of the 2 times we did that, on the way out to the airport, the one question that he kept asking was, how big is the United States pavilion?
Yes.
So that was sort of reassuring to us, because if he was thinking how big, he's obviously going to try to beat us, and he's going to come. And they did come.
I must look up statistically to find out whether he was big.
Yeah, I don't know what it would have been.
John McGregor will no doubt know
the
down to the square centimetre.
The USA wouldn't have been out of space.
Maybe you compromised and they were both exactly the same size.
Could have been.
Anyway, so just then moving on, and I had a really great question pop into my mind during that little bit, but it's gone now, but it'll come back. So Expo's concluded, they're in the process dismantling the site. You're confident that you have the land value is more than 200 million, and then the process was presentation, and I remember the photos, and it was a mixture between a Crown casino in one way and a really revamped Jupiter's, I think for want of a better word, was to be developed on the site. and then the proverbial hit the fan. I don't think 80% of people, I reckon, objected and complained and bellyached about it, and I think it caught the government, which would be a Ahern, completely off guard. And because I think Sir Leo was in favour of it, fairly certain Sir Frank Moore was in favour of it, but the people power really just rebelled.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was still being motivated by the guarantee that I had, in inverted commas, that I'd given to the government that they could put on for nothing, for nil cost. And here we were, $200 million still owing, and the land. So we'd actually gone through the procedure to ask for statements of interest for developers of the site. Now, I don't think, I can't recall, I don't think there was a casino in it.
you said it was, but it could be.
It would have come from one of the developers, but whether it was approved, it would have been another question, because you don't just put casinos.
That's exactly right.
Anyhow, when we got all these in, all these statements of interest in, we kept the government fully informed, but by this time the people were aware of what we were doing, and they had, the expo was theirs, their little baby, and they didn't want it to be ending up in a commercial development. Whereas with the development, it was not going to be all commercial, it was going to be parks and gardens and everything else. But anyhow, they almost rebelled.
They did rebel.
And then the government took the decision that they would hold the $200 million debt, look after it, retain the land, and develop a South Bank. And that was the best decision that could have come out of the
Yes,
expo.
yeah, I was adequate. We've now worked out what we need to do is to go back to the Commonwealth Games, and then as the history rolls forward into the expo, because there will be a bit of a byplay as to how difficult it was to convince some of these major countries that Brisbane and Queensland could actually put on and host a major world event, and that then obviously then rolls into the G20 question. So Leo.
Well, I think if we go back a little bit further, it's all related.
Oh yes, yep.
Back in the early 60s, for example, when we first had put the spurs into the then more or less moribund Queensland economy, where we were really a third world country at that time. And by the early 80s, we had the economy running very nicely, and Brisbane being restored to, well, not quite what it is today, but it became a modern city. But now the rest of the world, as you said, Peter, the rest of the world still saw Brisbane as some little town north of Sydney, and Queensland was cows and coal, and that was it. They weren't interested in delving further to see what we were doing, and no matter how many graphs and statistics we put to them, we had difficulty getting the point over. Now, that was very important to us too, because we were doing a lot of our borrowing for our infrastructure from offshore, and we first of all more or less had to tell them where Queensland was. Anyhow, the Commonwealth Games in '82 and then Expo '88 really showed the world that we were not just cows and coal, we were quite a sophisticated modern city, and a modern city on the up, moving forward. And I think from '88 to now, 25 years, we've doubled, I don't know the numbers, we've more or less doubled our economic picture. And it's, once again, we should show the world just what we're about. And by no means are we cows and coal now.
No,
we're one of the fastest growing regions in the world, and have been for a number of years. We're still increasing the rate of 4.5% to 5% per annum. And we can get that over with another exposition to our G20 people. We've scored.
Yes, exactly right, and that was really the intent behind the question, is that we do have the 25th anniversary, we do have a great story to tell, and sometimes in celebration you can use it as a leverage to present a better picture, and also then it will link into enabling the Brisbane Convention Centre, which is one of the world's best, there's no doubt about that.
Yep.
And that, you know,
cultural centre, the South Bank.
Again, you know, Goma, one of the world's best. And just the story behind the Integrity Bridge. I mean, that's world unique design construction.
Yeah.
Nowhere else in the world is there that. And you know, I'm hoping that the Lord Mayor has a look at the sculpture called Paradigm, which was first on Expo site and has been in storage, which was a world first computer controlled lighting, world first design sculpture. And so Brisbane has just so many unique and great assets to talk about. So Leo, look, this series of interviews has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the
Can
time
I
out.
give you one more anecdote to
Yes,
explain
great.
what I mean about people overseas in high places not spending the time to work out the strengths of people like Queensland, West Queensland. I'll give you an anecdote that happened just in the last couple of years. We were in New York talking to the insurance industry, the top line people in the insurance industry who were contributing or buying our bonds and whatever. And we had a function, and at the function which we hosted, I was introduced as Sir Leo Hielscher, the chairman of the Queensland Treasury Corporation and from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And this gentleman, top line man in the insurance industry, said, "Brisbane, Queensland, is that anywhere near BOR?"
You are.
He knew Steve Irwin.
Oh, okay.
Well, I said, yes, not far from BOR, but BOR's got 100 people and Brisbane's got about 2 million. That's the difference.
Thank God for Steve Irwin who put Queensland on the map. That's a good story. I like that.
It's a factual one.
I've no doubt. I've heard similar people say the same sort of thing about what Steve Irwin did for Queensland. Just an amazing guy. I mean, I'm loath to cry, but I must admit, when I heard that he passed away, I did cry that day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's another story. So with that, again, I'll just say, you know, we do have a lot of interesting stories, and this one, this series of stories with Leo has been just brilliant. And again, Leo, thank you very much. I'd hate to have to pay the time, the dollar value of the time that we've just taken up with this. To probably take my complete level.
I thought you were going to be
And with that, again, good morning and thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.